Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed channel. And today we're going to be continuing a discussion that we started last March 22nd, the day where the Brussels bombings happened. And because that was a live response, more of an approach to the immediate information that we had, we decided that due to the feedback that we got, due to the events, the reactions that have unfolded since then, it was necessary to bring forward a second discussion, of course, with guests that are actually in Europe and also will be sharing their direct experience, feedback, perspectives, and reflections on the matter. So I would like you guys watching to also be part of this conversation, because this will be more of a feedback process and that will take place live here. If you're watching live, if not, remember that there's YouTube comments for that as well. So I will introduce my guest for today, Pieter van Overschot from the Netherlands. Hi, Pieter.
Hi.
And also Viktor Persson from Sweden. Hi, Viktor. Welcome to the Hangout.
Hello.
So, guys, today we are going to be then diving into this aftermath process. It's been over a week since these attacks took place. So, Pieter, let's start with you. You live in the Netherlands. You're the closest to the target. So, can you share with us how it has been since then, what you realized, what you saw, your perspectives, what you heard around you?
Okay, well, definitely I'm really close to where the whole thing happened. It's about an hour by car or by train. And talking about trains, the first thing that I saw myself when going to work was that the train to Brussels from the Netherlands was not running. They stopped the service just for a security precaution, and later on it was running again to Brussels, but not stopping at the airport. It still skips the airport right now, because on the airport they are still deciding on whether to restore operation partially or not. So the impact there is really big. But also here in the Netherlands, we had quite a immediate impact, because of course people are scared because it's really close, and especially on big railway stations and on the airport also in the Netherlands, people get nervous about these kind of things. They start to get really feared, and the first reaction of people is that they start calling the police for anything they see that might be dangerous, like a package that's abandoned for a couple of minutes, and the police barely able to react to all those calls and maybe distracted from the real work they have to do. And there is immediately plenty of police also on spots where there's a lot of people in the big cities, maybe adding up to the fear, the nervousness of the people, instead of doing the opposite. Because it's, from my point of view, adding to a fake feeling of safety, as it is almost impossible to detect and stop this kind of actions the way we live in these busy countries with a lot of people living in it. So yeah, that's just a quick impression from the daily life here, that has been brutally interrupted by those bombings, and of course people talking about it all the time and looking immediately for who to blame for this. And of course the Islam is the first point to blame. Other people might blame politicians, might blame whatever they can blame, but who will never look at themselves and will never start investigate how our actual culture, our actual countries, the politicians allowed altogether to create a situation where we can have this kind of extreme situations where people are so desperate, you could also say it that way, that they want to blow themselves up just to attract attention to the point they want to make. So that's another point of view. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, and in relation to how you decided to stand in this situation, because yes, I can understand that once that you see it that close, so to speak, it's more even acceptable by people to be more fear-driven and going into paranoia. So how did you decide to stand in this situation? What did you practically decide to do? Who did you decide to be in the face of this situation?
The one very practical thing is that I started to take that international train just for one stop, just because nobody took it anymore, just because it was a blamed train. I don't know, so plenty of space to sit. So that was a practical point. No, besides jokes, my immediate reaction is to talk to people and to make them aware that the reaction shouldn't be fear, because with fear we are not solving anything, and also fear and direct blame to others is also not helping us in finding a solution. What we need to do is to assess the situation with common sense and start looking how we as a person can start creating a change in ourselves first, and then maybe in others, to investigate and start asking questions and try to find out why we as a community, as European countries, are allowing those situations to escalate and to come to this kind of proportions, and to filter out everything that is related to blame or to propaganda or that kind of stuff. So that was, yeah, definitely my first reaction to that.
Cool, thanks for sharing that. And Viktor, what were your first impressions when you heard about this event? Of course, we've talked about how there had been the Paris attacks before. You there in Sweden have had certain incidents also happening in the refugee asylum center. So there was this already like an ongoing, let's call it paranoia or state of fear or precaution going on there. But in relation to this attack, what can you say? What was your perspective or first impression as well?
In reading the various reports in the media in Sweden, what was clear to me was that we had like a very one-sided perspective on the event, where it was described as an attack against the Western culture, especially the Western ideal of democracy, freedom, liberal ideals, and like the analysis stopped there. Like, this is an attack against us, and we will not crumble into fear. We will fight this evil. And that was like what came through as the perspective. And I found that like fascinating, because it's such a nonchalant and arrogant and also ignorant perspective on what has happened. Because, like, if you ask yourself the question, what would it take for someone to deliberately blow themselves up, commit suicide with the intention of taking the lives of others? I mean, it's such an extreme act of violence that the accumulated suffering, like the moments that have created that particular outflow, are also like very extreme and very violent. And so what we must learn and see in order to really solve this problem that these attacks are, is that we must understand that it's part of the equation. Like, this current system is unsustainable, and with system here I mean economical and political, and well, that's basically economical and political system doesn't work. The equation is flawed, and terrorism is thus a part of that equation currently. So if you want this system that we have now, well, then you also accept and allow terrorism in what happened in Brussels. Like, that's a part of it.
And to anyone that would say, but why? What is our responsibility to it? Because I don't see it. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not, for the people that are blaming Islam, I'm not an Islamist. So what are you talking about? What kind of responsibility? So what would you say to them? What point is missed when people only look at the outflow consequence, like these bombings or attacks and things like that?
Yeah, well, I would say the point that is missed is like humanity. Because in order to understand what has happened, you have to feel for also the perpetrators and place yourself in their shoes. And also that requires some investigation, like what is it that has happened with Islam and the Arab countries? What has happened in that region? How have our countries, the Western civilization, contributed to the situation we have in those areas of the world now? And in taking that into account and understanding that the situation in those areas of the world is a direct consequence of our current profit-driven system, where only profit is considered and humanity or the feel for another human being is like non-existent. In understanding and seeing that, you will start to get the big picture of what happened, and also in that you start to see the solutions.
Peter, what we've also witnessed a lot, and this is something that we didn't focus as much on last Hangout, precisely because we don't see the value in placing a lot of attention into what people point out, such as stop Islam, anti-Islam, oh, it is the Muslims, it is their problem, they are to blame only, which from a certain perspective, we know that there are many, many variables to situations like this. In the past Hangout, we did discuss about how there's this creation of Islam as a very convenient boogeyman, in a way, precisely because of, yes, they, in a way, tend to be extremism, there's certain prohibitions in their societies, but what are we missing, or what would you say we are missing also in this perspective of only focusing on religion or Islam as a point to blame? What would you say on this regard, Peter?
Okay, to answer your question, I would start just to draw a picture of what happens here in the Netherlands related to that topic. We have the politician representing the extreme right wing here in the Netherlands, who immediately after the bombing picked up the topic again to say, okay, we should prohibit Islam as a religion here in the Netherlands. And where my first reaction was, okay, then we have to abolish all the religions and not only Islam, because I don't see any direct connection between religion and extremism in this situation. If I look at a longer period of time, now we might have this connection, and this connection is also imposed to us by mass media, which immediately is drawing conclusions about who to blame, who is the people, the kind of people doing this kind of bombings, what their motivations are. They are motivated because they go to the mosque and there are people talking them bad ideas into their heads, etc. That's maybe partly true, but not absolutely. The fanatism they have comes also from other sides. It's not immediately related to religion. And what we do, and that's something we can back into the relation of how can we do something about the situation ourselves, is in the first place we allow people like this guy called Wilders to be able to say those things because we voted on him during the last elections, because we need somebody apparently that is shouting this kind of extreme things on a political level, because we believe that's the best way to solve this kind of issues. So we need to look at ourselves as a population to say, okay, why did we allow in the first place a guy like this to come into politics and to be voted for, etc. So that's the first step of self-responsibility we can take. So yeah, that's supporting. Could you repeat your question, please? Because
Yeah, in relation to why people tend to only, or the majority, to blame Islam in this case, or to say it's not a false flag event, or it's not something that politicians planned. How can you not understand that this is a violent religion? And focusing only on the religious aspect of it, which you just explained in terms of how,
exactly,
it doesn't really make sense to also blame 1.2 billion people for this as a general religion. And I would always point it out to every human being that each one has the ability to, at some point in their lives, start questioning if they were indoctrinated into certain religion, to start questioning the kind of principles or ideas or dogmas that they're standing for. And that is precisely our responsibility. Why have we accepted religions to be a point of segregation, separation in our world? And why do we continue to fall for that kind of discourse to discuss and debate whether it was a religion or not, when there are certain things that we are rather kind of dismissing or leaving aside from this discussion, such as the war point that and the systematic aspect that Viktor has also mentioned. But we also had questions placed on the previous hangout in terms of what would be the politicians' agenda. So you just mentioned, well, why have we allowed a person like this, which is extremist in nature, to be part of politics, to represent the people? Any other comment on this, Viktor? Would you like to comment on this question? Does anyone know what the agenda of the politicians is?
Yeah, so my perspective on this is that instead of looking at it with this conspiracy air, we believe that the politicians somehow have like this master plan, to instead look at politicians and the government and the bodies controlling a country, to see that as extensions of the minds or the behavior of the inhabitants in a country. So like it's a pyramid from my perspective, where the inhabitants, they act in their daily living, they think, they create relationships, and then from that we have these extensions coming through, and that becomes our politicians. And in this case we do have backchat and thoughts where we think, whoa, that Islam guy is probably, I don't know, on social welfare, and he is probably out to steal my wallet, and he should be banned from this country. Why is he here? And what do we have in the country then? Well, we have a politician coming through, articulating those thoughts.
We also had another question which relates a little bit to what we were discussing. These questions are by Kevina, and she was asking, why is it that currently there seems to be only one major religion promoting attacks, while the rest of the religions have ceased terrorism? What makes that particular religion so different from others in that regard? She's referring to Islam. So what would you guys say on this? Who wants to go first? Peter.
Yeah. What I think is that it's maybe the situation we have right now, but if we look in history, you might have other connections to other. The Christianity was not really a religion that could be connected to very kind actions that were done in the Middle Ages, like the colonies in a way. we try to impose Christianity on those new countries we conquered over other people, and we as Christians, because that's from a European perspective. We murdered quite a lot of people, and we did atrocities that maybe are much more horrible than the bombings we are looking at now. Because yes, it is true, there are people that are killed, but there's no. If we look at how many people die every day from hunger, it's nothing. It's just it's something that's not absolutely important. But since it's close to us, then we see it in a different way. So to go back to the question, it is true now. Apparently, it seems there is a connection between the religion and the fact there's a lot of violence. But if we look at everyday life, the TV shows we look at, the movies, etc., have you ever seen how much violence there is in any kind of show we look at, the popular show the most, without even realizing we are watching to the bad guys fighting to the good guys, the good guys hitting the bad guys, and we are perfectly okay with that. There's no religion in that story apparently, but that's indoctrination we get every day, which is promoting violence instead of doing the opposite.
I absolutely agree on that point, that we tend to, as we have been mentioning, pointing fingers at this religion, looking at its history, depicting its prophet, and saying they are terrorists because they are saying this in their holy Bible or holy book or whatever it is. But we don't look within ourselves precisely to see how we are allowing that same violence and terrorism and essentially this sense of the enemy projected onto anything or anyone else, because we are not willing to look within ourselves and say, well, where in my life, in my world, am I allowing this fighting, this war mode? And this even exists. I'd like to also present a little bit of what happened after we made that hangout on the 22nd of March, that we had people coming attacking us, to attack us because we weren't presenting a particular perspective that they have been aligned to or want to affiliate to, and because of that they attack. Some people didn't even watch what we were presenting and were already attacking. And so after I said to the person, look, it seems you haven't watched the hangout, you're just dissing ourselves, so I suggest that you don't bring forth that kind of comments and questions and questioning, but more in an attackative mode, slandering actually, in this kind of media that is precisely here to unite, to inform, to create awareness. So this is also to prove how these kind of events also brings us many points of self-reflection. Where do I stand? How do I even engage in the kind of conversations and aftermath that comes with this, including in these kind of discussions and the comments that come up, and also in the comments and the questions that we've been reading from Kevina. It also proves much of that, and how the discourse or how the events are working in a particular way to set people in a very limited frame of reference in relation to why these things are taking place. And what we are doing here is precisely to expand it a little bit. In this case, it's, as Peter was mentioning, not only this particular religion. History proves another thing, in fact, and it's not so much religions, but what we as human beings have accepted and allowed to be normal, which is wars, which is fighting, which is always looking to create enemies for power, for domination, for territorialism, and all of this has become part of who we are. So I think that what we're witnessing in all its facets, from the attacks to people's reactions to whichever benefits from this, it's only reflecting that same human nature that also Viktor was mentioning. So Viktor, would you like to add to that?
I would first like to add to the point, to Kevina's question, okay, because in looking at the word terrorism, and I looked up the dictionary definition here, it's the unofficial or unauthorized use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. Okay, so if we then claim that the Western world isn't anymore part of terrorism, it like becomes quite a fuzzy logic statement, because what says that our violence is authorized? I mean, who is it that authorizes this violence? When does violence become official, and when is it unofficial? Because when we bomb people in Syria, for example, okay, our government has then made a authorization on that, though if we ask the Syrian people, I don't think they have authorized it. So isn't that then a form of terrorism? And what I want to bring through here is that these words and concepts, they are used as weapons in a way in the media, where it's like they are just used to instigate an emotional reaction, like terrorism. And then you're supposed to have this picture in your mind where they are doing something bad to us, and that's wrong, and we are right because what we are doing is justified. Though, you know, in removing all of these concepts and all of these vantage points, it's just in reality violence being done unto each other, regardless if we are Muslims or if we are born in Europe, wherever we are born. It's like a crime against life, and in the bottom of it all, it's a crime against ourselves, because we are doing it to ourselves.
Absolutely. That is always a suggestion also for our viewers whenever something else happens, to look at this greater picture, to remove the tags such as Muslim, religion, terrorists, as you guys are saying, politician, and rather look at, well, what is this human allowing? What is this human being brainwashed with, indoctrinated with, that is enabling him or her to do these kind of attacks or these kind of things? And so we will stop seeing through only the globes, the bigger globes of politics and countries and ethnicity and races and all of these, and religions, of course, as sort of the point to blame at. She also asks, also from Kevina, please address whether it is a practical and best for all approach for countries to take in refugees, considering the Germany sexual assaults, rapes in Sweden, and also possibility of suicide bombers disguised as terrorists using refugee status to enter the countries. So, you want to comment, Peter?
Yeah, specifically since I'm also living close to Germany, thinking about the German problems we had at New Year's Eve with the assaults. The mainstream media immediately assumed that it were refugees, mainly the cause of those assaults, and only weeks and weeks later, when they stripped down everything, they found out that were just people living in Germany already for a longer time. It's not. There were, as far as I remember, there was no refugee involved in those assaults. But the first thing we did was based on indoctrination, propaganda, whatever it is that mass media is doing. We believed and we judged immediately that those people were the people to blame. And yeah, well, that's a danger. We have to be careful about that. Another point that's following the discussion we have here is that came to my mind is that due to ignorance and the fact that we follow the indoctrination, we believe everything that's said on the mass media, we are actually really ignorant about Islam, for instance. And since we don't know or we know very little about it, or we know the wrong things about it, it's very easy to blame something we don't know, sorry, for the problems we have. Sorry.
Okay, Victor, would you like to also give some perspectives on this, specifically her question in relation to refugees, because it seems that she watched the Hangout and immediately she linked to the possibility of this kind of getting bigger, of course, and what has been happening in Europe, of course, as Peter was mentioning in relation to how these events are portrayed within the media in a certain frame to precisely what I like about these questions is that it also represents how people are linking events to then formulate or add up to the case of, yes, Islam refugees are the problem in Europe. What's your take on this?
Well, I would say that here what we are doing ourselves through media, because if we look at media as an extension of ourselves, we can basically see that we are manipulating ourselves to form a particular conclusion, create an opinion about what is going on here. And as I have been sharing throughout this Hangout, what we are not yet doing is that we're not taking a step back and looking at the big picture. Okay, because we have to ask ourselves, why is it that refugees exist? I mean, refugees, how did that concept, that particular creation come to be? Why is that something we accept and allow in this world to begin with? If we can completely remove refugees from this world so that each human being has a home, has a place to live, has a stable life, has an income, food, etc., there can't be a refugee crisis. A refugee crisis needs refugees. So I would say that's where we have to improve ourselves, start becoming more objective about things, not react emotionally, but take a step back and look at, okay, what caused this?
I would also add to that, precisely within that awareness of seeing the real cause of the problem, not only the consequences as refugees invading Europe or these attacks and so forth, to look at what kind of reason pushes people to leave their homes or leave their families, their country, because of something that they haven't really been directly also participants themselves. So in essence, terrorism, as you were mentioning earlier, has been brought to them with some kind of certain good or noble cause, which we know is, I mean, war is never the solution, fighting is never the solution. And I would also add to this that the politics of hate have to be stopped. It's kind of disheartening to also review a lot of comments that are having place on many videos that I've also watched throughout the week on, you know, hating Islam, hating Muslims, hating, getting angry, and being extremist in this sense. So this also reflects a lot to where we're still at as human beings, where, you know, what do you do when you think that something has been done unto you? You blame, you get angry, you get frustrated. You get, you know, in this stance of, I am right, those guys are wrong, we have to kill them, exterminate them. That is obviously never the solution. Fighting is never the solution. Creating this enemy is never the solution. So what would you guys say also as a way to finalize the Hangout? And I would like to remind our viewers to place any comments, questions if you have them. But Peter, what would you say to someone, and maybe also speaking from your own example, how to behave in this context of hatred, anger, pointing fingers, blame? What have you done? What have you also applied as a father with your family, for example?
Well, happily enough, my kids are pretty critical creatures, so I didn't have to discuss a lot with them because they have a broad perspective on this topic, and we have very interesting discussions about this, but in a very open mind. So they're not going into blame, into hate, and into thoughts of exterminating the evil, because they have learned that if you are hating someone else, you actually are hating yourself. And so you have to do something about that. Why am I so hateful against somebody else? What is going wrong there? And the best example is maybe the discussions I have during the day with my colleagues, where I, of course, try not to be too direct immediately after this kind of events, because they might be still in a real shock of what happened, shock caused by fear. So first, I tried them to see the things in the right perspective and to get rid of the fear, and then we can start discussing real arguments about, okay, why are you angry at this situation? Are you angry at the people that did it, or are you angry maybe at yourself that somehow you kind of allowed this kind of situation to happen? Other people react in a different way, that say, okay, it's starting to get dangerous here, maybe I should move to a country where those things don't happen. And then I say, well, it happens all over the world unless you're going to live in the middle of nowhere. But is that really what you want? I've been there. I've tried to move to somewhere very remote because I was not happy with how the world was living and doing their things. But I found out after a couple of years that was not the way to go. I really needed to face the world, to face myself, and to do something about it. And my contribution is to talk to people and make them aware of their fears, and to let them think about, okay, what is my motivation of the fear? Where does the fear come from? And analyze it, and to see, okay, what can I do about this fear? Am I properly informed about the things that are causing this fear? And very often they see that there's a lot of information that is causing them to look at it in a different perspective, and they might also discover that they are able themselves to do something about it, to change this perspective of the immediate community they are living in, and starting to discuss about the specific topics, make topics possible to be discussed instead of being pushed away and just waved away with okay, they are bad people, we should just shoot them, but open the discussion and to see if there are other ways to solve this problem.
Absolutely, that's the point of self-reflection and self-analysis, self-investigation, that I think you also place a very good example in terms of, taking the train, not giving in to the fear, just keeping on with your life, realizing that, well, we're here to live, so let's just get to it instead of falling into that immediate fear. So thanks for sharing that. And Viktor, there is a question, but let me know if you first want to address the same point, the same question that I did to Peter. Otherwise, we go to the question that we have. What do you say?
Yes, okay. So I want to say that the solution that I see is that we as individual human beings must embrace the principle of what is best for all. And that implies do unto another as you would like to be done unto yourself. So if we want to stop hatred and violence in this world, we must do that. We must live that ourselves. Because it makes sense. I mean, how can you want terrorism to be removed from this world when you yourself are spewing out hatred and violence in your words, in your thoughts? I mean, you're a part of the problem. So that would be the first point to address, to make sure you yourself are not part of this hate cult that we have created in this world.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that, and that's very much something that we can all make a little bit of analysis in ourselves and see, well, where am I, even through ideology, through standing in a certain position, waging war at the other side, because in the end we're all equal, we all are humans, and the moment that we stand in this divide and conquer mentality, we get conquered, of course. We have a last question from Rep Dalmas, and she's asking, can we ask ourselves what has happened to all the animals left behind in these war-torn countries? How are we so self-involved that we have not asked about these sentient beings? Very cool point.
Yeah. Well, my first reaction was just being the devil's advocate is, do we need to worry about that? Because do these people live with their animals, their pets, in the same way that we do? Maybe they don't. The animals just live on the street or are in the fields and they don't care too much about it. So it's just to underline that ignorance about these things might cause this kind of thoughts, and then we just shove it away and we don't care about it. But she definitely has a point. That we should think about. We only think about ourselves, our own safety, and we see those refugees coming to us with just a couple of possessions, and we're not thinking about these aspects that they might have been leaving their pets, their dog, their cats, maybe their other animals, horses, etc. back home. Maybe they're already dead because they're not feeded anymore. So that's definitely a point of view. I agree.
Yeah, within the context of doing what's best for all, as Viktor said, I mean, just by stopping wars, by stopping the manufacture of consent for wars and of weapons and all of this industry that really only benefits a few, which is actually the starting point for these massive disgraces in this world. Not only humans lose their lives, but also animals, the environment, the pollution, the people that work in these factories. I mean, they also risk their lives, factories of weapons specifically. So of course that the world would be a better place without none of this happening, but I fully agree that we first have to start within ourselves. When we stop creating an agreement of war, of consenting to war, because that will then makes us simply get rid of all the military-industrial complex and the manufacturing of weapons, and then we will start seeing that, well, if religions stand as a point of disagreement and segregation, why not instead acting by principles instead of focusing only on religions and certain aspects that are against others, that are aggressive points toward others? So, Viktor, any perspective on this question that Rep placed?
My perspective would be that in order to create effective animal rights, we have to first establish human rights. And that would, as you say, involve this process of self-development and self-creation in removing what is here currently as the human nature and replacing it with something that is benevolent and able to be a custodian and custodian for all the animals and plants and various lives existent in this world.
Yes, and also a point with that is that we stand by these principles of precisely as equal life foundation to consider what's best for all, to not so much focus on the consequences, but look at the origin of the problem, how all of this could have been prevented if we just had eradicated the notion of fighting another as a way to sort out things, to solve things, that could have already prevented much of this in general. And also, I'd like to remind our viewers that we're doing this precisely to give us another perspective that is non-conflictive, non-inflammatory, because a lot of the media, even alternative media that is being created, is creating this sort of opposition and antagonism, and gets very popular because it goes with this egotistical drive that we as humans have had in terms of taking a position and fighting someone. So please do share this video if you find it meaningful and supportive in terms of taking a broader perspective and consideration of our humanity, more self-reflective, more self-responsible in all aspects. So thank you very much, guys, for your perspectives and for sharing here. I very much like the fact that we can come to these kind of discussions and conclusions, even if in the world around there's a lot of disagreement. So let's stand by principles, and yes, let's do what is best for everyone. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Viktor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
And thanks to you, the viewer. We will see you as usual next Sunday for our regular Hangouts. Please leave any last comments that you would like to place on today's discussion, and we will make our best effort to solve them and clarify them to you. Until next time.